something into a binary choice that might not necessarily be one. I'm going to give you my kind of thought on that here in a moment, why I think the future for Georgia quarterback has the potential of being very, very bright, both near-term, short, long-term, whatever else. We'll talk about that here coming up in just a moment. I'm going to try to lay out my thoughts on exactly why that is, and we'll see if that is indeed the case. So your comments for now, my thoughts later on. It's DawgNation Daily presented by Meriwether and Tharp, and this is our first and 15. We ready to do all that. Ohio Dog checking in today. Always great to see that. Jay Shipes also checking in there as well. We appreciate you all being on board and having a good time with that here today. Nick Saban has also said some very interesting things about name, image, likeness, and he's kind of weighed in a pretty heavy way on that. That's obviously gotten some attention. Anytime a coach of Saban's stature steps up and says really anything of note, it's going to get a lot of attention, and Saban, no different here when he weighs in on what kind of has been the hot topic that's been out there for a while involving the name, image, likeness stuff. So that's there. Our buddy Terrence Edwards, certainly looking forward to finding out what Terrence thinks about G-Day coming up on Saturday, what he's expecting to see. We'll have more of Kirby Smart on the topic of quarterbacks here coming up a bit too, because obviously, when you try to listen to the rumor mill and what's happening with spring practice and all the stuff that's related to that, there is always going to be, even in a normal year, if there ever is such a thing, there's always going to be this amazing curiosity about quarterbacks, because it's the kind of thing that you hear described to you, and oftentimes this is from maybe someone who was at a scrimmage or at a practice, and then second and third hand we hear what this person says they saw, and we're left to kind of fill in the gaps in their own imagination of, what does that mean and what does this mean. Kirby Smart will tell you some more of that here coming up a little bit as we all go into G-Day on Saturday. By the way, welcome into our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch audience. By the way, I'll ask you a question. Maybe I should know this myself. Is the forecast for Saturday still looking bad? Because I know at one point in time the forecast there was pretty lousy. Is that still the case? Let's see if I can pull this up quickly. I can't probably do this as quick as I'd like to, but I know at one point in time that weather was pretty bad. Yeah, looking like 80% chance of rain, as we've talked about the other day. The percentage on that doesn't quite mean sometimes what we think it does, but expecting a lot of rain, it looks like, on Saturday in Athens. I hope that changes, man. That's not what I want. That's not what I want. Hassan says, for G-Day, does the number one defense go against the number one offense? Yeah, typically that's the way that it goes. And that's one of those things that makes sometimes a Georgia spring game a little different. I think Alabama has typically kind of done the same thing. There are a lot of programs that do almost like a professional wrestling style version of a spring game where they pit the number one offense against the number two defense. And the reason why they do that is because they want to kind of pad stats. They want to kind of, put on a nice show. And I'm not against the notion of a spring game being a little bit of a made-for-TV spectacle, a made-for-streaming video spectacle for some of these teams, now these days. I'm not necessarily against that, but it is important to note that for a lot of what you see for Georgia, you do have, as the coaches like to say, good on good, ones against ones. At least in some form or fashion, you get a good bit of that for a Georgia spring game, where you don't always get that for other spring games. William Perry checks in to say, go Dogs. Appreciate that. Brian Whitehead says, forecast looks pretty gloomy, and I would say indeed that it does. Hemingway on Paul Feinbach. Sometimes words are hard. Hemingway weighs in here on Paul Feinbaum's comments on Stetson Bennett. Yeah, I think that Feinbaum said a couple of odd things about Bennett as of late, and I know Mike's got a story up about one of Feinbaum's comments. I don't know that it's the strangest thing that I've heard Feinbaum say about Bennett as of late. I told you the other day, it's kind of interesting to me that on a show, the Feinbaum show, which is very much for kind of a I won't say what it's very much a show that takes casual fans' level of knowledge in mind with the kind of content it produces. That Stetson Bennett's become famous enough that even Paul Feinbaum knows who he is. That even someone like Paul Feinbaum, who for the most part talks about a handful of coaches and a handful of quarterbacks, and really nobody else is quite famous enough to be on Feinbaum's radar. Now Stetson Bennett kind of is, and I do think that Feinbaum said some pretty weird things about Stetson as of late. Feinbaum just says whatever. I mean, we obviously all know that. But as far as I guess the crux of the piece that Mike had up about, what happens if Stetson Bennett gets outplayed on Saturday? I've told you before that if you want to be the leader of this team, going out and outplaying the other quarterbacks on that roster on G-Day would be a pretty good step towards all of that to maybe quiet some of that down. Unfortunately, though, I think we all know the truth here. If Bennett somehow has worse numbers than one of the other two guys, that'll be treated as a very big deal by a certain pocket of Georgia fans. However, if the opposite is true, that won't be treated as anything. In other words, there are a group of folks who have a preferred narrative, and they are going to further that narrative, facts be damned. And so on this show, hopefully we'll be fair to everybody. We're going to point out good things, bad things about everybody. We're just going to try to keep the conversation, fact-based here, because ultimately we don't have a preferred outcome other than, we're, Georgia football, show. We're going to talk about what Georgia football fans, want to talk about here. But in terms of like picking sides of one quarterback over the other, that's just never really been our thing. And so I think that gives us a chance to have a little more logical, level-headed conversation. We're not going to ignore the bad things about one guy and ignore the good things about another. We're just not going to do that around here. And so I do think that one way or another, what happens with quarterback on G-Day is going to be a conversation. But let's just make sure we have it with all facts presented on all sides, and that's one thing I hope we can do. Hassan says, I'm curious to see the freshman DBs. Yeah, I think that's interesting too. Now, one of the things that I always kind of say is that even in a place like Georgia where, their scrimmage is a little more, authentic, I think it's still sometimes a little bit hard to evaluate DBs all the way around because, DBs are still kind of in a situation like this, forced to play what I'm, going to kind of think of as kind of like vanilla type coverages and things like that. And if they're running step for step with the guy, obviously you can take something from that. But ultimately, the defensive game plan is probably a little bit handcuffed in comparison to what it would normally be for a normal game. A couple more comments. We'll get ready to get started. He also says Dalen Everett's my favorite. Yeah, I got high hopes for Everett, and I definitely think there is room for a Georgia freshman defensive back, maybe even two, but certainly at least one to step in and have a very big season for the Dogs, and I would say that Everett's a real good candidate to be able to do that. Let's see. Richard D says he's going to be watching G-Day from the Columbia Zoo. Go national champion Dogs. Well, listen, however you can find a way to get your eyes on that. Richard, I know you're going to be enjoying that, and I hope you enjoy the zoo there as well. Brian Whitehead also on the George Pickens, is it an Instagram comment that's gotten some attention where some people, and listen, I told you before, a lot of times, I actually don't even know what some of these social media comments really even mean. Like the thing from Ajayi Hall the other day we were joking about, it's like, wait, I couldn't find out he did transfer, but when he responded to something about the idea that he was transferring, based on the way that the comment was written, I was left to wonder, wait, is he confirming this or is he denying this? Like sometimes the Instagram stuff or the social media comments are oftentimes difficult to decipher, but there's a statement out there from Pickens that has led some to assume that maybe he was taking an anti-Georgia stance and a pro-JT Daniels stance on Daniels' way out the door here, and maybe that's the case. I mean, it's been, I guess, speculated a little bit that George may have enjoyed playing with JT Daniels more than he enjoyed playing with Stetson Bennett. And as someone who doesn't, stir up controversy about that, and some who think some of this, Bennett stuff has been overblown, as Kirby Smart himself also said a couple of days ago, I'm going to tell you this. I think that George Pickens has earned the right to have an opinion. Pickens, when he's played at Georgia, has played very hard for UGA. And even though I might not agree with every aspect of Pickens' opinion on some of that kind of stuff, for instance, I'm not quite so sure he was thriving under JT Daniels as much as he thinks he was. But Pickens, because of how hard he played when he was at Georgia, how hard he worked to get back on the field, he's earned the right to, if that's his opinion, I would say that George Pickens has earned the right to have an opinion. And all the more reason why, even though there are a lot of things about the previous 2021 quarterback situation that I see differently than many of you do, the one thing I'm going to give JT a ton of credit for is he never did any, including his final day on the way out the door. He never did one thing to throw a log on that fire, and he could have, and obviously there, would have been plenty of fans who would have loved to jump right in there on that. There'd been plenty of media members who would have loved nothing more than to stir the controversy on that. Daniels himself never played that game, not one bit. And listen, we're all human beings. We understand Daniels being a human being. Of course, he probably wanted to play, and it's just stands to reason that when you are not playing, especially when Daniels finally was healthy enough that he could have played, or at least in his, when he felt like he was, ready to go again, and you're not getting that chance to, well, of course you get frustrated by that. I mean, anybody would. You would assume that's the way that Daniels felt, but he never made it public. He never, aired his dirty laundry, we're in a day and age now where that kind of stuff in college football is a lot more public than it used to be, but that's not something that Daniels ever did. I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And as I said before, I don't necessarily probably fully agree with George Pickens' assessment of the situation, nor do I think that, I just think that that's maybe a little bit more complicated than maybe George is letting on there. But given what Pickens did for Georgia when he was healthy enough to play, he's earned the right to have an opinion, if that is indeed his opinion. Now we'll get ready to get started here in a moment. Cat Story says JT was always the gentleman and always supported Bennett. Yeah, you can't say he didn't. I mean, honestly, we're going to talk more about this in a moment. Georgia's obviously lost its share of five-star quarterbacks out of the program. And honestly, every single one of them has done right by UGA with the way they've left. And we had reason to believe that different guys at different times were pretty unhappy, maybe, but they never made it they never made it public, and so I think you give them some credit there for that. JP, I'm going to read this and we'll get ready to get started. He says, this year is so completely different for our quarterback. We will not have a generational defense, at least early on, and we will have to lean on the offense. Whoever is quarterback is not going to have to win games. It says is going to have to win games, just not lose them. And so obviously that's been a part of the Georgia narrative, that the defense expects not to be as good as it was in 2021. I've said over and over again, the job of the 2022 defense is not to match 2021. It's to be as good as it needs to be in 2022 because the actual performance from UGA game to game last year left such a huge gap that Georgia could have been even more of a typical Georgia defense, not just greatest defense of all time, which Georgia arguably could have been in the conversation of, and still for the most part been fine. The only regular season game that Georgia would have likely lost without a Herculean defensive performance was the Clemson game, and Stetson Bennett didn't play in that game anyway. So, it's just important to have full context, for all of that. All right, good stuff. We got more comments coming up. We'll do that then. So a lot of quarterback stuff, as you might imagine. Just the Daniels news, even though that Daniels doesn't do anything himself to kind of stir all this up, the Daniels news just kind of regenerates that conversation here just a little bit. So let me give you one different way to think about all of this. And it's done with the thought that maybe a couple of years from now, that the Georgia fan base, which has been somewhat divided here related to quarterbacks for a couple of years, might soon be united in a very big way with a very bright future for Georgia at this position. I think it's certainly possible. It may even be more likely than not. I'll explain why as we get ready to get going. Plus Terrence Edwards, plus a look at some of the fun things we have ready to go for G-Day on Saturday. All of that on the way. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So there was some news yesterday that kind of stirred up a conversation that has been ongoing amongst UGA fans for kind of quite some time. And by the way, by quite some time, I mean in some respects, maybe even a number of years here. We finally found out yesterday where former Georgia quarterback JT Daniels is going to land. Now, Daniels is actually still a student at UGA. He has to finish his coursework, but eventually he's going to transfer. And the thought was he was down to three finalists of Oregon State and Missouri and West Virginia. And later yesterday, we found out that Daniels is going to choose West Virginia to be paired again with a guy that he at least spent a brief period of time working with at USC, former offensive coordinator there, Graham Harrell, now with West Virginia. That Daniels is on his way to Morgantown to be a part of that program there in the Big 12. And as I said before, this news, we've kind of all been waiting to find out where Daniels is going, but just the announcement of the news, the announcement of all of this, just kind of restarts that quarterback conversation amongst UGA fans. Now, to Daniels' credit, he has done nothing to throw any logs in that fire whatsoever. That I've said before that, sometimes being a DGD is not so much about like, hey, did you give 4 years to this program and did you do this? Sometimes it can be about a moment. A moment alone can make you DGD. I've said in the past that look at the way that Jacob Eason left Georgia after the 2017 season, losing his starting job, stepping aside, letting Jake Fromm lead UGA to the college football playoff, never doing anything to create a quarterback controversy. I think that, in my mind, makes Jacob Eason kind of a DGD for Georgia, even though he didn't play very much here. And, when he did play, he played kind of only okay. But the way in which he left the program helped preserve a very special season for Georgia. I think Eason should get some credit for that. I think the same thing's kind of true for JT Daniels there as well. Daniels obviously has plenty of fans among UGA fans, plenty of supporters among the media. If Daniels had wanted to stir things up, he had every right to do so. If he wanted to stroke his own ego at the expense of the team or at the expense of the guy that he got beat out by, Stetson Bennett, he had every opportunity to do that, but Daniels himself never did. Even in the story with Pete Thamel at ESPN.com, JT says some pretty nice things about Georgia, that there is a very DGD way in which Daniels leaves this program, even though his time at UGA doesn't kind of end up being the everything that maybe some folks hoped it would be. His departure certainly was done in a very classy way. I think you got to give him a lot of credit for that. But even if Daniels doesn't throw logs in this fire, stirring it all up, even if that's not Daniels' intent, there are still some fans who kind of couple this with some of the other quarterback news that's been out there for UGA in recent years, that Daniels, I guess, becomes, the third five-star quarterback to transfer from this program under Kirby Smart. You go back to, as I mentioned before, Jacob Eason. There was Justin Fields in between all of this, and then Daniels here most recently. And when you have five stars leaving the program and the former walk-on leading the team, even if he was leading them to a national championship, there's an element amongst some Georgia fans where it almost seems like bizarro world. Wait, why are the guys that are, sort of measurably more talented leaving, and the guy that would seem to be measurably less talented, the guy that gets pegged as the starter? And despite the fact that Georgia wins the national championship, that the decision worked, there's still some Georgia fans who are like, yeah, but I'm still confused by it. And I said this a lot during the year last year of, there's no denying this is weird. Now, just because it's weird doesn't mean that it's wrong, but there's no denying that it's weird. And so I don't actually fault some Georgia fans who want to try to make some sense out of what they see as weird. Now, there is a pocket of Georgia fans that I do fault who just want to be unhappy and want to see if they can drag somebody else to an unhappy place. I do fault them, but I'm not even talking about them for a moment. I'm talking about another group of Georgia fans who are like, this is just sort of confusing. And I totally understand that. And I don't know that I'm smart enough to take the confusion away from this topic, but let me see if for a couple of minutes here I can give you another way to think about what is obviously a hot topic amongst Georgia fans, and the kind of topic because the five-star guys are leaving, the walk-on is thriving, like what this might mean for the present tense for Georgia, but maybe more importantly, the future. We clear on this? All right, let's try it this way. So let's say that Georgia, who we've described many times, is kind of charting its own path right now. I talked earlier this week about what the Kirby doctrine is. That Kirby seems intent right now to build his program in a slightly different way than some other programs are being built right now, and I believe that helps explain why Georgia won the national championship this past season. But let's put that aside here. Let's say that Georgia had to emulate another program, that you had to build Georgia a blueprint for success based on the success of another college football program. And I were to ask you, hey, you can't go about this your own way. You can't chart your own path. You've got to pick somebody else's blueprint for success. And if I were to ask you that and say, which program do you want to pick? My guess is your only choices would be a small handful of programs. That you would pick one of the teams that has won a national championship in the college football playoff era. If we had to make a pick of which blueprint Georgia should copy, it's probably one of the teams that's been winning championships most recently. That means it's Ohio State. That means it's Alabama. That means it's Clemson. That means it's LSU. Those are the four other teams besides UGA that have won national championships in the college football playoff era. And if you had to copy one of those programs, if you had to copy another program, that's probably one of the programs that you would copy. And among those that have won national championships, if you could pick one of those to copy, I still think that Alabama is probably the one that you would copy because they've been doing it longer and they've been doing it better than the other programs on that list. And it just so happens at one point in time, Kirby Smart, because he worked at Alabama and came to UGA on the heels of having that success as Nick Saban's top lieutenant, I think it was largely assumed that Kirby Smart was going to copy Alabama. In fact, there were some people there for a while who thought he might be trying to copy Alabama too much. But certainly the notion of Kirby Smart building a program using a similar method for success that Nick Saban has built at Alabama, this is not the first time that kind of conversation has come up. So for the sake of conversation here for a moment, let's say that Georgia was going to copy what Alabama has done in terms of building the success that it's built. And if you had to choose one program to copy, Alabama would probably be the one that you would do so. So I think it sometimes gets assumed that the fact that Georgia, as of yet under Kirby Smart, has not had a great quarterback. And I don't think that Georgia has had a great quarterback yet under Kirby Smart. I think they've had good quarterback play at times, but I don't know that Georgia's ever had a great quarterback so far in the Smart era. I think that some people think that demonstrates a lack of competency on the part of the Georgia program. Whether Smart, who's led the program, or other offensive coordinators who've helped him manage that side of the ball, I think that some people have assumed that there is a lack of competency at Georgia that has prevented Georgia from having a great quarterback. But what if that's not the case? As I told you before, I wanted to give you a different way to look at the quarterback situation. What if the lack of great quarterbacks so far at Georgia is not about a lack of competency, but a lack of maturity for the program? And to sort of further cement that idea, let me mention Alabama again here a moment ago, because if you look at Alabama under Nick Saban, obviously the program in recent years has been dominated by great quarterback play. Bryce Young just won the Heisman Trophy. Mac Jones before that led him to a national championship. He's starting in the NFL. Tua Tagovailoa kind of had the whiff of kind of being an all-time great there for a while. I think the jury's out on that now, but certainly had moments at Alabama where he played really well. And then, Jalen Hurts before that kind of stepped up and gave Alabama kind of a new level of quarterback play as a freshman there in 2016. But prior to that, that is not what the Alabama quarterback situation was at all. And I think it's important to remember that as the Alabama program matured under Nick Saban, the level of quarterback play got much better. In fact, let me show this on the screen here for a moment. So Nick Saban was hired as Alabama's coach for 2007. And so if you look at from that moment he was hired in 2007 until prior to the 2016 signing class when Jalen Hurts came in and started a domino of big-time quarterback play after that, look at the other 4- and 5-star quarterbacks that Nick Saban signed before that. Now, I haven't included 3-star guys here because none of them really did anything, and I don't have room on the screen for all of this. But here are the 4- and 5-star quarterbacks that Nick Saban signed from 2007 through 2015. Do you remember Star Jackson in 2008? Whatever happened to him? I think he ended up at Georgia State. A.J. McCarron was a very good player, went on to win national championships, so that's a big win for Nick Saban. But how about the 2010 class? 5-star quarterback Phillip Sims. I honestly have no memory of him whatsoever. I don't remember him at all. How about 2013 Cooper Bateman, a 4-star, did nothing while at Alabama. David Cornwell, 2014, a 4-star, did nothing while at Alabama. There was 5-star Blake Barnett in 2015, did nothing while at Alabama, transferred out. I don't think he did anything. I think at Arizona State he went to, I believe. I don't think he did much of anything there as well. So you really, from the period that Nick Saban first took the job in 2007 all the way to 2016, you really only have one quarterback recruit that succeeded for Nick Saban. That was A.J. McCarron, and he succeeded in a big way. But Nick Saban didn't recruit another player out of high school capable of starting for him until Jalen Hurts in 2016. That was Nick Saban's 10th recruiting class while being in Alabama. And after that, the dominoes fall, and it goes from Jalen Hurts to Tagovailoa, and Tagovailoa to, passing the baton to Mac Jones, and then Bryce Young steps and everything else. But all of that didn't happen until Nick Saban got to his 10th recruiting class at Alabama. For Kirby Smart at Georgia this upcoming season, he's about to have his 8th recruiting class. So there is a level of program maturity that Nick Saban saw at Alabama once he got to a point that Kirby Smart is now only just reaching there at UGA. And so when you think about the way in which everything else has been built out at Georgia, and the program has found a way to win a national championship, the program has found a way to be a year-in, year-out contender, despite the fact that much like Alabama had in the early days of Nick Saban, less than great quarterback play, I think it does speak to a notion that as guys like Arch Manning in the class of 2023 or Dylan Raiola in the class of 2024, as guys like this start to make their choice, when they figure out where they want to go, it just becomes very easy to imagine they'll do like Tua once did and Bryce Young once did of, let me just make the obvious and irresistible choice and go to the program that's got everything else built out around for me. That's what happened for Alabama. I think there's a very good chance that's what's going to happen maybe for UGA there as well. That as the program matures, as Kirby Smart, who was a rookie head coach when he took over in 2016, as he gets more and more chance to fully build out and develop this program, that better quarterback play is on the horizon, much the same way it was for Alabama. Now, let me make one final quick point about this and then we'll move on. The obvious retort to all of this is, well, BA, what about the programs who've had better quarterback play than UGA? Because it's not just Alabama out there. There are other programs who've had better quarterback play than UGA. What about them? I think the other programs that you might mention here in this regard also kind of speak to the point that I'm making right now. Because look at LSU for a moment. In 2019, that's a team that's won the national championship, had one of the best quarterbacks in recent college football history. But when he left, what else did they have? Nothing. They've been off the national radar ever since then. Look at Clemson. Clemson was a fixture in college football playoffs year after year after year. They had great quarterback in Deshaun Watson. They passed the baton after that to Trevor Lawrence. Truly great quarterback play. But in the aftermath of those quarterbacks not being there, when you don't have all-time great quarterback on your roster anymore, all of a sudden the lack of depth on the offensive line, the lack of proven playmakers, all of a sudden some of the other holes that Clemson has in its roster become more paramount. Once again, great quarterback covers up a lot of foibles. When you don't have that, maybe you realize, oh, this isn't quite as mature, quite as fully developed a roster as maybe we thought it was when they had a great quarterback who was distributing the football. Same for an Ohio State, who is good year in, year out, almost always seems to have a great quarterback. But sometimes it seems like great quarterback is about all Ohio State has had going for it in some respects, or maybe not as fully built out in other aspects of the game. So post-2014, we haven't seen Ohio State winning national champions. We've seen them be good, but we've seen them fall short. Sometimes the quarterback without the rest of the program to go around it, maybe that ends up being kind of the reason why there. So let me put a bow on all of this. For the Georgia fan who says, hey, this program hasn't been great at quarterback yet under Kirby Smart, I believe you're just factually correct. I think that's true. I think Georgia's been good at quarterback, but not great. And for the Georgia fan who says, and it's just really outrageous that former five-stars aren't thriving here at UGA, that's the part I might disagree with, because I just showed you a laundry list of former highly rated recruits at quarterback for Alabama that didn't thrive either, until eventually the program is so good that it also got the very best quarterback there as well. So for those of you who are kind of trying to figure out what's going on at quarterback, my request to you is this. Just be patient. Let it play out. Enjoy the success that UGA is enjoying, with the idea there's even more success potentially to come on the horizon as Kirby Smart one day builds a program that's just as mature as the one was at Alabama when Nick Saban finally started getting his own great quarterbacks as well. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video. We start at 9:45 for our first and 15 on DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Glad to have all of you with us on video. Quick apology there as well. I know we had a pretty significant audio issue at the beginning of the show yesterday. I apologize for that. I heard from some of you on that, but hopefully we're all cleared up on that. Certainly apologies there on that. By the way, radio audience at noon on Athens Sports Radio 96 The Rev. Glad to have you there too. Podcast form, Apple, Spotify, Google, worldfamousdawgnation.com. A bunch of different ways for you to get in touch, and we appreciate you being there for us as we do all of that. And a big thanks to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for making it all possible. I know our folks at Merriweather and Tharp looking forward to G-Day on Saturday. Love any chance to be down there in Athens. Bob and Ashley Tharp and the whole family, I'm sure they'll be around and having a good time there on that. And many of you looking forward to doing the same thing. But obviously, it's not all fun and games this time of year for some of the folks here in our audience. We know that the subject that Merriweather and Tharp has really been devoted to, dedicated to for so many years, that's prominent, top of mind for many of you. I'm talking about the divorce process. You've tried to save your relationship and you've come to the conclusion that it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to be savable. And I am sorry for you on that, but the one thing I can tell you is you will be made happier. You will be made whole again when you make the decision to put a strong advocate on your side, doing big work for you to help build a better future for yourself on the other side of this divorce process. That's where Merriweather and Tharp steps in. They're your source for Georgia divorce. They understand the law. They understand how the law can be leveraged to your benefit for some of the issues that matter more than anything else in this life. I'm talking about finances and your relationship with your children, things like that. That's the kind of thing that Merriweather and Tharp understands. Not just the legal ramifications, but also the emotional toil that something like this takes on you. So Let Merriweather and Tharp do work for you. Let them listen to your story. Sometimes it's just kind of nice to have somebody sit there and listen to you, and that's what Merriweather and Tharp wants to do there for you as well. It's the AtlantaDivorceTeam.com. That's the website, the AtlantaDivorceTeam.com. Have a free initial consultation with one of their attorneys. Tell your story. Let them tell you the next steps, and then you'll be on your way to a happier tomorrow after that. But you got to reach out. Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at the AtlantaDivorceTeam.com. All right, we've got Terrence Edwards coming up here in a little bit. I'm running a little bit late, so I got to pick up the pace to get to Terrence. I want to do around the doghouse before we get there and keep the subject of quarterbacks here going for a moment, because with everything that's happening right now, there's obviously some curiosity related to, well, what is quarterback going to look like for Georgia on Saturday? You know, we've heard whispers about this and whispers about that. And listen, the whispers you have in the college football rumor mill are no different than the telephone game you used to play when you were a kid. You know, you passed around the same statement enough, all of a sudden it gets diluted or distorted or something. But what can we expect from quarterbacks on Saturday with Stetson Bennett, the presumed starter, and Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff battling to back him up, battling to show they are themselves worthy of some playing time, quite possibly. Last week, Kirby Smart took a moment to lay all that out of what he's seen from quarterbacks thus far this spring and kind of allowing this to preview G-Day for us. This is Kirby Smart.
All those guys have done a tremendous job. I mean, Stetson's taken some really good quality reps here in the scrimmage. He's been really consistent this spring. You know, he's very comfortable. It just, you know, when things break down, he doesn't have to go make a play like he used to think he had to go make a play. He makes a good throw or he runs the ball, and usually those are two really good positive things that Stetson's done. He's been really consistent this spring doing that. He doesn't have the snafus that we used to have just because he tried to force the ball. He hasn't done that. It's come with ease to him. The other two guys have gotten a lot of work with both the ones and twos. I'm really pleased with both where those guys are. I mean, it's just amazing how far they've come from this time last year to right now. It's like, oh my God. I mean, it's just Brock probably even further. You know, he was a little bit younger, and Carson didn't get that COVID spring, so they really are both in their, I guess they're really their second spring, right? But they've come so far, and you know, I love getting to watch them play with both those groups because you see their strengths when they get to go with those groups. And so, you know, we're in a good position at that position, and each one of them is developing.
I love what Smart says there at the end. We're in a good position at that position. And I think if you're a UGA fan and you want to, I guess, you know, have what I would view as the proper mindset going into Saturday is I think you want all your quarterbacks to play well. I mean, I think you want Stetson Bennett to continue to take the next step after, let's not forget, he was Orange Bowl offensive MVP. He was national championship game offensive MVP. I mean, it's a pretty good way to finish the season, and I think you hope to see him take the next step with that in front of the fans on G-Day. But I think you're also hoping to see Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff do well because you root for those guys, but also because you do want Georgia to have some quarterback depth. I mean, quarterback injuries have been a part of the story now for Georgia for a couple of seasons. They're a part of the story for most programs in most years. So having a guy that you trust and feel good about playing beyond just Stetson Bennett, I do think is important. Now, as far as the Bennett stuff, there's been a lot said about Stetson this offseason. I think some of it's been kind of weird. The other day, Kirby Smart had said something about Bennett, and I think some folks kind of took that and ran with it. Remember, we played the Atlanta radio interview the other day where Kirby was asked about whether or not there was a problem between he and Stetson Bennett, and it's just been a very weird conversation, related to some of the stuff that Kirby has said about Stetson this spring. And last week, Kirby finally got a chance to respond to what some had been saying about Smart's previous statements about Bennett, and Kirby tried to clear the air on that. This is Kirby once again from last week.
Yeah, y'all made a big deal out of that. It's like everything is blown out of proportion. I mean, I'm challenging him to do exactly what every player's challenged to do, right? Be the best leader, go to class, make good decisions. I mean, that's not real far-fetched for anybody, but somehow it gets spun into Stetson's like in this doghouse or something. I didn't say any of those things. So I think it gets misled and like misconstrued, because when I challenge somebody every day. So Stetson has really he's taken on the role we've asked him to do. He's been a good leader. He's playing the best football he's played since being here, and he continues to get better. So I mean, I want to see him continue to do that, and I want him to continue to get reps so he gets growth. But getting those other two guys reps is critical too. So we do a lot of strategic work on reps to make sure those guys are getting better and getting opportunities.
So good stuff there from Kirby Smart. And look, the conversation around quarterbacks is not going to slow down or stop anytime soon. I was glad that Smart kind of cleared the air on that there a bit. And obviously we head towards G-Day on Saturday. What Bennett does, what the other guys do, Carson Beck, Brock Vandagriff, it's obviously going to be a source of great curiosity. And frankly, it's going to be really pretty entertaining. I mean, this is fun. And typically speaking, Georgia likes to throw the ball on G-Day a pretty good bit. We should see these guys. And, barring bad weather, which I guess right now kind of looms over us like a dark cloud, both literally and figuratively. But barring, really bad weather, we should get a chance to see these guys throw the ball a little bit on Saturday. And I'm certainly very entertained by that thought. All right, so it's Terrence Edwards here coming up on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp today. While we're getting him locked and loaded, ready to go here, let me remind you about one of the big things we have going on Saturday there as well. And I'll tell you more about this tomorrow. But on Saturday morning, prior to the game, we're going to do our KRoger Kickoff live from the Creature Comforts Tap Room there that day with our friends in the Players Lounge. You've heard Aaron Murray and Keith Marshall on the show in recent weeks telling you about the cool things the Players Lounge is doing to both provide NIL opportunities for current Georgia players, but also deeper connection with their favorite players to a whole lot of Georgia fans. And they've got a huge weekend of events taking place in Athens at the big golf tournament and, an event there on Friday night, but also the great tailgate from Creature Comforts there on Saturday. We're looking forward to being there, broadcasting live, having some special guests on there that day. So all that's coming up on Saturday. I'll tell you more about that as we get ready for tomorrow. But if you're going to be in Athens, make plans to come over and see us at the Creature Comforts Tap Room there that morning. The event itself starts at 10:30, kind of leading up basically right up until about kickoff there. We'll be broadcasting live. A lot of great, dog lettermen throughout the year is going to be on hand there as well for that, including our buddies Aaron Murray and Keith Marshall. Champ Bailey's going to be there as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun coming up there on Saturday. I'll tell you more about that. But go ahead and make plans to see us before the game there at the Creature Comforts Tap Room with our friends at the Players Lounge. Okay. Now, a lot to do, getting ready for G-Day on Saturday. A little late getting to him, so let me not keep him waiting. It's our buddy Terrence Edwards, the great former Georgia wide receiver here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Glad to have you as well with us on the show today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So we'll say hello to Terrence Edwards here. Always great to have him on the program. Chance to kind of look ahead to what's going to happen at G-Day on Saturday. And Terrence, I was saying this before you joined us, that with JT Daniels, finally announcing his transfer destination, it has kind of restarted a conversation that has been ongoing for a while with Georgia at that quarterback spot of, folks are left to wonder, well, you've had 5 stars like Jacob Eason and Justin Fields and now JT Daniels leave the program. You've had a guy with seemingly lesser credentials and Stetson Bennett who's thrived in the program. And to some people, the word I use from time to time is it just sort of seems a little bit weird. And I understand all of that. And yet it has worked out well for Georgia. You can't argue with the results. They are the reigning national champion. But with all that in mind, the backstory of what has happened at quarterback for Georgia, the need for, as a lot of fans are going to say, better quarterback play this year because you might not quite have such a historically good defense. What are your thoughts about quarterback right now going into a chance we hope to get to see all these guys play on Saturday for G-Day? Where are you on all of this?
Well, number one, I don't see why there's a lot of talk about Stetson right now. I don't know if there's chatter about him not being the starter going into the Oregon game. That's absurd to me. You got to have a guy that's essentially been a 3-year starter now with this season upon us. So he's entrenched into the number one guy. Now, what we need to be talking about is every player is always one player away from being a starter. So we definitely need to define and see who's that number 2 guy is going to be. And that's just going to come with practice reps this spring. And I think the coaching staff will get a clear-cut idea who's going to be that number 2 guy, because just like how Stetson got his opportunity because of injury, I don't know, let's knock on wood that he could play however many games that the Georgia Bulldogs play. Who's going to be that guy to come in, and are we as confident with him being in as Stetson? I say no because of the experience, and experience matter. I don't care if a 5-star come in, and experience of a guy who's led his team to a national championship. That experience matters. So experience going to take over right now, but let's see who's going to end up at 2 and 3 right now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think a year ago you probably were looking into a situation with both Beck and Vandagriff where Georgia, just to be honest, probably didn't feel all that comfortable playing them in a game that was undecided. And to me, the first step for those guys is to get over that hump. I agree with you. I think it's ludicrous to think that, right now Stetson Bennett somehow fighting for his job. In fact, I think that Kirby, for the most part, has kind of put that to bed, I think. But it is still interesting to see what Beck and Vandegrift are doing, in that, hey, is one of these guys now the person that you would feel okay playing in the first half of a game that's still tied, in the kind of game where, if there was a mistake made, it could cost you the game. And maybe, young quarterbacks like Beck and Vandegrift a year ago weren't quite there. But if Georgia were to leave spring practice feeling like one of those guys would be that guy for the upcoming season, then I just think that becomes an even greater chance of success for the team for the upcoming year, because we've seen injuries be a part of this. We've seen injuries matter where, Georgia wasn't able to finish the season last year with the quarterback that it started the year with. And, there were injuries that kind of were a factor in the 2020 conversation there as well, that you do need to have more than one quarterback ready to go here. And that's kind of what is happening beyond the Stetson Bennett talk here this spring, right?
Oh, most definitely. B, I'm going to take you back to 1995 and see if you remember this thing. I think the old Georgia fan base will remember. I think that 1995 team, when Robert first moved to running back and Bobo was the starting quarterback, and we had a rash of injuries that year. Yeah. Robert got hurt. Mike Bobo got hurt. Brian Smith had to come in at quarterback. I think Bryce Hunter got hurt that season. But that season was looking very well to shape up to be a very good season for us, and we had a rash of injuries. So I think Kirby and his crew have done a great job in just stockpiling talent. I think this is very evident that he stockpiling talent at the quarterback position. Now it's just young. We really got to go into and see who's going to be trustworthy to win that number 2 spot, just in case something happens to the starter, like that year with Mike Bobo getting hurt, and we had to go with Brian Smith at quarterback. So I think the biggest conversation piece is not Stetson and what he's going to do. It's really, do we trust, or do we have a guy that we trust at that number 2 guy, just in case something happens to Stetson. So that's the biggest conversation piece that's been going on in my mind. When I went to practice, and Carson looked very well, and Brock and Gunner. So we have talent behind Stetson. Now it's just got to mature and get experience. I just hope they have gotten a lot of reps this spring to kind of see who's going to win that number 2 spot.
So if you want to talk 1995 Georgia football, I could do that with you for the next hour if you wanted to, because I have very vivid memories that season. Hines Ward playing quarterback by the end of the year, against Tech and in the bowl game and everything else. And I promise we won't get down this rabbit hole too much. But to me, Terrence, that's always like one of the great what ifs in Georgia football history. If Bobo doesn't get hurt that year, if your brother doesn't get hurt, Tennessee game, Georgia had a real chance to win that game on the road that year. If Robert, I think it was an ankle injury he was dealing with at the time, if he doesn't get hurt right there, that ended up being Coach Goff's last season. And listen, I love Coach Donnan, but there's a chance that the history of Ray Goff at Georgia could have turned out a little bit differently had Bobo and your brother and guys like that not gotten hurt in that 95 season, because just a couple years later, a lot of those same players were having a very good year for Georgia that Goff himself could have potentially been a part of.
Oh, most definitely. And you're right. Hines did end up playing quarterback that year, I think against Virginia in the bowl game. Yep. So, we always talk about, the injury factor. It's a part of the game. It's a part of the game, but I think Kirby and his staff have done a tremendous job of stockpiling talent just in case of a scenario like that happens where the number 1 guy goes down, that you have a guy who's capable of holding the fort down and playing up to the standards that they set for each other.
So let me ask you a couple more questions on this topic, then we'll move on and talk about something different. You mentioned being at practice the other day. When it comes to Carson Beck and Brock Vandegrift, we're hoping to all see this on Saturday between these two guys. But when you were watching at practice, did you see much of a difference with one over the other? Beck's a year older. Was he using that to his advantage? Vandegrift's the former 5-star. Was that talent edge, on display? Could you tell much of a difference in performance between Beck and Vandegrift when you saw them during practice?
You can see that they're more confident. I don't know the play calls. I don't know what's going on within the play, but you just could tell that they played with more confidence, played with their chest up. They wasn't shying away from the competition, making the throws that they need to make. So that's the biggest thing about any sport. You have to play with confidence. And they was playing with a lot of confidence because they knew exactly what was going on. Gunner's only been there for a few months, so he's still behind. But Brock and Carson has been there for a full year now, and Carson there 2 years. They just understand what Todd Monken is trying to do. They understand the tempo of practice. They understand college football. So that's the thing that I looked at is just a confidence factor.
Let me ask you one more here, and you have every right not to answer this because it's revealing information for private conversation. But there was a Instagram post from George Pickens, a reply to something that JT had put out there, where it was kind of, I think, interpreted that maybe Pickens had preferred playing for JT Daniels. That's kind of a part of the rumor mill, and some people assume, well, maybe your protege Jermaine Burton felt the same way. Did Jermaine, based on your conversation with him, prefer playing with JT Daniels as opposed to playing with Stetson Bennett?
That's one of the things that I'm not even going to ask those guys, especially Jermaine. I don't want him to get to even talking about his old teammates or behind their back or anything like this. So I'm not going to put him or myself in that situation to even go down that rabbit hole, be honest with you. So that's why I haven't even asked him.
Totally fair, and I certainly understand all of that. As far as the rest of stuff on G-Day on Saturday, you've obviously played in a lot of these, and here's my assumption, having not been a player, and I'm curious if you can tell me this is true, that it probably does feel different than a practice, feels different than a scrimmage. For a young player who hasn't played in a regular game yet, a fall Saturday, that when you do it in front of the TV cameras, when you do it in front of the crowd, there's a level of maybe butterfly in the stomach that you just can't create during practice. And while it seems like the importance of spring games is kind of being lessened across the sport, there is that element, if you're a Georgia coach, of, hey, how do you look when all of a sudden the bright lights are turned on, when you got Joe Tessitore and Greg McElroy there to call the game on TV, and you got tens of thousands of fans there in the stadium? Is there a little bit of an extra measuring stick that comes when all of a sudden the stadium's a little bit more full and not quite so empty the way that it would be for a typical scrimmage?
So just for, since I did play a bit in that situation, for an older guy, once I became a junior and senior, it's a game. You understand college football. You played in games already. You played, at 3:30 on CBS. You played under the lights at ESPN. So it's just for the younger guys, especially for the guys that haven't played very much, get opportunities to showcase their skill set. Still, as an older guy, you're still going to go out there and perform, and the crowd is there. So it's a little bit more than a scrimmage and a little less than a game. But for the younger guys who haven't had an opportunity to play in between the hedges, it's very exciting for them. I know my first one, I was very excited to showcase my skill set in front of the crowd. And that was a stepping stone to me being to the player that I was. So for the younger guys, and like Dom and Eric, even for those guys, they haven't played very much. So I'm sure they're going to be excited to get in and show the fans and show themselves that they still can do it. So for the guys who haven't played very much, this is their game. This is to show the world that, I can play, and I should be able to earn some playing time for my performance in this whole spring practice, and that led up to the game.
Here's another thing I'm sort of curious about. Like in a previous life, I used to go to Falcons training camp a pretty good bit, especially back when I was up in Greenville. I was working for a radio station. I'd spent a good bit of time up there. And when you're watching a lot of these NFL practices, especially during the summer, like these players get so sick of practicing against each other. They're fighting all the time, really hot, doing these drills. Right. It doesn't take much, and all of a sudden, it's helmets on, so nobody's really getting hurt or anything. But people are slapping and pushing and shoving just because they just get sort of sick of doing the same thing against each other over and over again. Not quite as hot for us football college spring practice, obviously, but I guess I kind of wonder after a while, are you just sort of tired of beating on the same guys and the same drills over and over again? And there's maybe a little extra edge to a spring game just because for the last however many weeks, all you've been doing is competing against the same guys, and you're just a little irritated by that. You'd be ready to go out and play against somebody else that's not wearing the same color jersey you are. My guess is there is a little bit of competitive fire for these players because they've been, kind of going up against each other in these drills here for the last few weeks.
It is. It's football at the end of the day, and it doesn't matter, especially in the spring game when the so-called lights is on. It'll be on ESPN and everything that's surrounding the spring game. but it's more fights when, it's closed doors and there's no media, there's no fans, and it's hot and you're tired, especially during camp. And you're just tired of that guy's beating up on you or you beating up on him, and frustrations boil over, and that's when fights happen. Not too much in the spring game, because a lot of times the players know that this is the spring is almost over. Right. But especially during camp, it's when the hot days or tour days and you're just tired and irritated, and the guy can do one thing and it just boils over. So
along those lines, and then I want to ask you about something else before we let you go. I guess how nice is it to be at the end of all of this? Because listen, these players love getting better and they want to, improve their bodies and improve, their understanding of the game, and that's what spring practice is kind of all about. But I'm guessing sort of like that next day after spring practice, when maybe you get a little bit of downtime. I'm honestly not sure what the schedule even looks like after that for the immediate future. But, to be on the other side of spring practice, I got to imagine for these players it's probably a pretty good feeling as well.
It is. You get a little downtime after that, but they understand that summer workouts is upon them, and that's not nice either. The early mornings, getting up, running the stadiums, the workouts. I just wish the common fan really could go through a life and day of a college football player, college athlete, period. Understand that what y'all see on Saturdays is very small compared to what a college athlete goes through on a day-to-day basis. And I mean, just being up early before everyone, the workouts is tough, and it meant to be that tough to break you, to build you back up. And then, once you get past that, fall camp starts and it's hot, tour days, and I know the rules have been more lax now. When I played, I don't know if they could really have tour days anymore. Mm-hmm. But it gets frustrating at times, and you're just ready to be over. You're just ready for fall to get here, so you can actually go to class and not just all football and do something different. And then the games start. But that summer is probably the toughest time because of the extreme workouts you go through.
So let me finish with this, Terrence. It's a little bit different topic here, but it's been a hot topic this week. That's the transfer of Amarius Mims. Obviously, former 5-star, elite, prospect, seemed to be on his way to a bright future eventually at UGA. Some have been left to assume maybe it wasn't quite happening for him as fast as he would have liked for it to. And now he's on his way. He's taking, big visit to Florida State. They kind of rolled out the red carpet for him there a bit. Miami, I guess, has been in the conversation there too. What do you make of this current landscape where guys like Mims are leaving? They're going other places. There are reports of NIL money and everything else. What do you make of the Mims situation?
So I had a lot of conversations the last couple of days because we lost 3 offensive linemen, 2 former 5-stars, and I kind of came up with a solution. I know we always talk about, it's bad, but I haven't heard anyone really come up with a solution. So, B, I want to give you my list of what I think it could be expanded, it could be talked about, but this is what I came up with. And my first one is the biggest one is you can leave and you won't have to sit out if the head coach leaves. It's been too many times that head coach sitting in your living room. I've been a top recruit, head coach sit in my living room and tell me and promise to my family that I'm going to be here for the long haul. Yeah. And they're there 1 month, they're there 2 years. And if a head coach leaves during your tenure, you're eligible to leave without sitting out. That's number one. Number two, you are able to leave without sitting out with 3 years removed from high school. Just like you're eligible to go into the NFL draft after 3 years removed from high school. You're eligible to transfer without sitting out. That gives that team enough time to have you there. You're just not quitting on the team. I'm not going to use the word quit. I don't like that word when fans use. So, like in Mims' situation, he was there for a year. That's not enough time. Like that, to me, like, what are you running from right now? You got to be able to compete in life. You got to be able to compete. So it's not enough time to you to really find your way. So you got to be 3 years removed. That give you enough time to, okay, this is not the place for me. 1 year for a Mims is not enough time to see this not the place for me. That's number 3. And with that, you got to be in good academic standing. You got to be on track to graduate, to be able to leave and not sit out. And if you leave before the head coach leaves, if you leave before the 3 years, you have to go back to the old rule. So in a Amarius Mims situation, you have to sit out a full year. You got to sit out if you leave before you're eligible to leave. I just don't like that. I don't like the fact that guys there for a year. I know some guys be there for a semester and transfer. Like, that's just not fair in my opinion. Of course, if you graduate on time. If it takes you 2 years and you graduate and you fill all your academic obligations, fine, you can leave without being able to sit out. Essentially, you're a grad transfer. So those are just a couple of things that just in my mind I wrote down. And just the biggest thing is with Mims is just like you use that for a full year. Like work, get there and work a little bit. You're one player away. You're behind McClendon who's going to be a 3-year starter. You're behind Jones, Broderick Jones, who actually played a lot last. Like you're behind 2 really good tackles. So fight it out, keep competing, keep learning, and then your time is going to come. And I preached this last year. Everybody knows how I am with Jermaine. That is my guy.
Yep.
Did transfer and is that something I would tell him to do? No, I would tell him to stick it out, but he decided to leave, and I'm going to stick with him. If you see my Twitter, I'm always going to expose and talk about Jermaine. That's what I'm going to do. Justin Robinson is another one. Like all the guys that I've had, I'm going to be on this side regardless.
Yep.
Am I a big transfer porter guy? No, I've said that plenty of times. But just being there for 1 year, like Amarius Mims, and you got 2 really good tackles in front of you, and you could have been a third guy. You're 1 player away from being a starter. So those are just some of the things that, I don't agree with the transfer portal. And that's just some of the things that I came up with off the top of my head that we got to have a couple rules there that stop that type of stuff, but still give the players the opportunity to leave if situations change, like the head coach situation changed.
Terrence, I like it all. I love where you're coming from on that because I know how much you care about players and I know how much you care about the sport. So guys like you taking a lot of time to think about stuff like this, I think it's really important, a conversation for us to have, because I know it all comes from the right place when it comes to you on this. And you mentioned the guys you've worked with, guys like Jermaine and Justin and guys like that, guys playing big-time college football right now. You're doing the same thing for that next generation of wide receivers there as well. And as we say goodbye to you today, I want you to remind folks of how they can get in touch with the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy. I know you've been doing a lot of great work here right now. This is a great time of year to be doing football work because the weather's starting to feel pretty good. You can get out of the bubble now. You can get outside again, which is kind of nice. So where is the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy, and how can folks get in touch with it?
You can find me at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy on all social media platforms. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Terrence, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So I love when a guy like Terrence, who, as I said before, this is a guy who loves the game, right? He's made his life out in the game. He's a player, played professionally, now he's coaching. This is a guy who has, respect for the game. You just hear that respect for the game, dripping off of his words when he speaks. And he also kind of has the thought of, okay, well, I'm a coach now, but I've been a player before. So I think he understands the value of coaching. He doesn't shy away from wanting to push players to get better. And yet he also doesn't shy away from the notion of, well, this sport can't just trample all over the players who play it. You can't just say, hey, for the sake of the game, we give you no rights whatsoever. And I don't know. I mean, I think when it comes to some of the big issues facing college sports, there aren't necessarily easy answers sometimes, but the better answers are going to come from a wider perspective, someone who has the ability to really see it from more than one vantage point, the vantage point of the coach, the vantage point of the player. And guys like Terrence Edwards, I think, are the guys that we ought to be listening to on stuff like this because, you can be pro player while also understanding the value of having a coach that's going to push you to be a better version of yourself. And, you can be pro strength of college football and pro stability of the sport while also understanding that, hey, we need to also make sure we're doing right by the guys who are playing this with their, freedom of movement and opportunity to cash in on some of the obvious financial resources that are, surrounding, this sport right now. Guys like Terrence Edwards do a really good job of all that. Let me very quickly say we're cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Then I'm going to give you more on that topic here in a moment based on what Nick Saban has said. But for now, let's think about fun in the sun. Let's think about cruising with DawgNation here coming up in just a couple of weeks. Or if you can't be with us as we leave out of Port Canaveral to go to Nassau in the Bahamas, Perfect Day, Coco Cay, onboard Independence of the Seas. Trust me when I tell you, this is a great time to be thinking about your own cruise vacation. Y'all, it's just so much fun. I mean, that's the thing. That we were on Harmony of the Seas back in February. It had actually been a few years since I've been on a cruise. And I just love the thought of, because I'm a very big beach person. If I go to Perfect Day, Coco Cay, I'm going to the chill side, and I'm just going to hang out. Like, my wife's kind of the same way as me on that. If we're not chasing around our kids, and this past cruise we were not, which was good times. Not don't disrespect to my children, but if it's just the two of us, we're going to plop in a chair, get one of those mats, and float in the ocean or something like that. That's just what we're going to do. But and that's always really fun. But when you're on the cruise ship, then you get back on board, and all of a sudden, the entertainment's kicking up. You got live music taking place. You got shows to go to, comedy shows, and music acts, and everything else. I obviously love to eat. Many of you know that, and so I'm just going from restaurant to restaurant. Like, there's just such a wide variety of stuff that I enjoy, eating and drinking and entertainment. It's just all so much fun. And for the folks who are lucky enough to be with us on the cruise, with DawgNation coming up in a couple of weeks, a few days now, they're going to be experiencing that. But as you hear us talk about all the fun that we're having, just know that this summer is a great time for you to book your own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation there as well. So if you go to the top of the page at DawgNation.com, you can click in, find out more about the DawgNation cruise. You can also visit our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority to find out about your own cruise if you can't be with us there for the DawgNation cruise that is upcoming. So that is going to be a great time. All right, speaking of the hot topic of the moment, NIL, you heard some of Terrence's thoughts about the transfer portal a moment ago. Nick Saban kind of weighing in on some of this stuff there too, including the topic of NIL in particular. Saban's words carry a lot of weight because he has been so successful, and in recent times he's been pretty outspoken about this topic. I think I have a quote I can show you here for a moment, where Saban says, the concept of NIL was to create opportunities for players. That's what it was. But that creates a situation where you can basically buy players. You can do it in recruiting. I mean, if that's what we want in college football, if that's what we want college football to be, I don't know. And you can also get players to get in the transfer portal to see if they can get someplace else that they can get more someplace else they can get at your place. That's Nick Saban, who spoke out about this recently. A lot of folks have paid attention to that comment there in the middle where he says, I'm not sure this is what we want college football to be. It's almost exactly like what Saban once said about the hurry-up, no-huddle offenses that were dominating the SEC conversation around 2013, 2012 with Kevin Sumlin at Texas A&M, Gus Malzahn at Auburn, Hugh Freeze coming into this league, and Saban expressing some skepticism about that. And then lo and behold, 5 minutes later, Alabama was doing the same kind of thing, and a lot of folks are saying, "Oh, is this Nick Saban kind of giving this warning out before he truly tries to dominate the transfer portal?" He's obviously taking a lot of high-profile transfers already, but maybe getting ready to dominate the portal even more. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But I do think you got to take Saban's words here pretty seriously here for a moment, even though what Saban is mostly arguing for is the kind of thing that benefits his own program as opposed to what's going to truly benefit the sport all the way around. And ultimately, when I talk about this kind of stuff, transfer portal, NIL, even though this is admittedly a pro-Georgia show, I try to come at this from the standpoint of I want to be pro the sport. Like, what is good for the sport overall? Georgia's going to be fine no matter what. For instance, I think we have some video we can show of Amarius Mims, visiting Florida State. A lot of people make a big deal about this. Oh, the guy that just left Georgia is getting wined and dined down there in Tallahassee. I can tell you this. This doesn't bother me one bit. It really does. Florida State could get Amarius Mims. They're still not even in the same orbit as Georgia. They're just not. They lost to Jacksonville State last year. Amarius Mims alone ain't changing that. So I'm just not all that worried about this all that much. However, I do think with a guy like Mims, leaving Georgia, going if he ends up at Florida State and getting the red carpet treatment that he's getting there, while I don't think that's all that detrimental to Georgia, Georgia's still going to be fine. I do think there's an element of that that's kind of detrimental to the sport potentially a bit. And I guess let me say it this way. Like, I like golf. A lot of you like golf. And if you watch golf at the highest level, or if you're, fancy enough that you're going to the best golf courses, I am not. The tracks that I play on are not fancy. But if you are going to the really fancy golf courses and you really are into golf, here's the one thing you understand. A bad golf course is one in which good shots are punished. That, sometimes you see this with the U.S. Open, where they have the greens shaved down so low that even a good shot gets punished. You hit it on the green, you get it where you're supposed to be, but it's still rolling off, or there's too much wind or something like that. That a bad golf course is often one in which good shots get punished. I think that's what we're looking at with the current college football system. The reason why I think it's a bad system is because I believe good behavior is being punished. Who's doing right by Amarius Mims more? Georgia, who brought him in here, and even though he's a former 5-star, said, we don't care about that, we still expect you to work? Or Florida State, who says, oh, man, come down here, red carpet treatment, whatever else. What's really better for Mims right there? I'd say it's the Georgia. I'd say it's the Georgia treatment. I'd say Georgia's. And I talked about the Kirby doctrine the other day of we're going to bring in talented players. You have to have them, but we're going to push talented players to get tougher because that's better for the team. It's also better for the players themselves. That's the Kirby doctrine, I believe. And I would say that right now the current system kind of punishes the Kirby doctrine a bit. That's not going to be bad for Georgia. Georgia's still going to thrive, but if it's now wrong to push talented players to get tougher, to push talented players to get better, to tell them not to expect everything to be handed to you right away, if that's now wrong, if that's now punished by the current system, then I think the system is messed up there. And I know that makes me kind of the old man on the porch, but, be that as it may. One more thing here quickly. It is not just Georgia G-Day on tap for Saturday. You got some other SEC games there as well. In fact, there's a lot of them. There you go. Look at that schedule. So let's roll through this. Arkansas is at noon Eastern. That's streaming SEC Network Plus. Mississippi State's at 12. That may be worth watching because Mississippi State's a relatively interesting road game for Georgia this upcoming season. Georgia's got the big TV spot there on ESPN2. Vandy's at 2 p.m. I wouldn't watch that with your eyes. Alabama's at 3 p.m. How about Alabama? Relegated to streaming video this year. SEC Network Plus for Bama. Got pushed to the stream by the Georgia National Championship, I reckon. And also South Carolina at 7 p.m. there as well. I think the South Carolina game is pretty fun because I do want to see how Spencer Rattler looks there. I want to see how the Gamecocks fans respond to him. That could be a pretty fun story in the SEC here this year. My expectations for Rattler are pretty high. I told you yesterday, season win total for South Carolina at 6. It's not going to be easy to necessarily improve on the win total from the Gamecocks a year ago. They probably overachieved a bit relative to expectations last season, but I do think Rattler in Columbia makes the Gamecocks a bit of a tough out. Probably, though, the most interesting non-Georgia spring game storyline for me on Saturday probably does involve the Alabama game. The thing I'm the most curious about is I want to see Jahmyr Gibbs in an Alabama uniform. I expect him to be a very good player, but I guess here's what I'm curious about. It's like we have seen the running game in Alabama just devalued so much the last couple of years. This has just not really been a great rushing team the last couple of years. Well, now you've got Jahmyr Gibbs, and as I kind of mentioned, I forget if it was on video or what yesterday, but Gibbs put up huge numbers on a bad team a year ago for Georgia Tech. Is he going to be a focal point, kind of a feature of the Alabama offense? Are they looking to run the ball a little bit more this year? I think dominance along the line of scrimmage for Georgia is a big reason why it won the national championship game. Can Alabama get back to that at all? You've heard me say before that Bama's kind of become a finesse program. Does the presence of Gibbs allow that identity to change at all? I don't know how much you see that necessarily on the spring game for Alabama, but I am pretty curious about that. I'm curious to see what kind of role a guy like Gibbs plays there for that team here this season, and we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let me also tell you about another fun event that's happening for G-Day weekend that I want you to be aware of. It takes place on both Friday and Saturday. That's our friends at the UGA bookstore. Starting Friday from 4 to 6 p.m., yeah, how about Trayvon Walker, potential number 1 overall pick, along with 2 great other former dogs, Isaiah Wynn, Thomas Davis. They're signing autographs at the UGA bookstore from 4 to 6 p.m. Of course, it's right there next to the Tate Center. $30 autograph will also get you a 5x7 photo to get signed there. I'm telling you right now, that's really cool there on that front. And then on Saturday, from 10 a.m. till noon, there before the game, which starts at 1, how about 3 members of the Georgia National Championship team all there together? $30 autograph, gives you a 5x7 photo to get it on. Jamari Salyer, Quay Walker, Justin Schaefer. Quay's another guy that's just flying up draft boards. That is... That is really fun to see. Maybe you'll bring one of those Tennessee straw hats, let him sign that in honor of the hat that he threw when he came to Georgia. Either way, talking about 4 national championship dogs over the course of the weekend there at the UGA bookstore. A couple of great former dogs there as well, and Isaiah Wynn and Thomas Davis, all going down Friday and Saturday at the UGA bookstore. That is going to be a lot of fun. I'll also see you at the bookstore after the game for the DawgNation postgame show. Looking forward to that there as well. And as I told you, Saturday morning we'll be at the Creature Comforts Tap Room with our friends at the Players Lounge, Aaron Murray, Keith Marshall, Champ Bailey on hand. We'll be hanging out with them there, doing that there too. So a busy weekend getting you ready for G-Day. A lot of fun. Great time of year with the Braves yesterday, with the Dogs on Saturday. Cruise coming up there as well. It is a good time to be here around DawgNation. By the way, follow-up to a story we reported yesterday. I always like to sound like a newsman when I can. That's my newsman vernacular. We talked about Jordan Davis throwing out the first pitch for the Atlanta Braves, and the question we asked was, and for whatever reason, I'm a stickler for first pitches in baseball. I'm just curious to see, who does well with these. We talked about, Davis's ability to throw. Happy to report, Jordan Davis delivered a strike. I think we actually have this to show. Davis was great in the TV booth. Saw him walking around the Battery before the game there, having a good time doing that. Look at him with the legendary coach, Vince Dooley was there for the play ball. I mean, Davis from the mound gives you a strike. Y'all, at 300 whatever pounds, that is not easy to do. I continue to be impressed. You got Harry Dog there, blooper. Man, this is a great day to be at Truist Park yesterday. Braves game didn't turn out so great, but it was what a fun day to be with dogs. Good times there. And by the way, let me tell you who's not having that kind of fun right now. Those lousy, stinking Gators. Long-time national title drought for them, about 4,844 days. Tough to be a Gator, and it's going to be tough again less than 200 days from now. This is our Gator Hater Countdown. Dogs back in Jacksonville, 198 days from right now. Beating up on Florida for the most recent time, for Billy Napier the first time. Can't wait to do all of it with you. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. It's been warm the last couple of days with 80-degree temperatures. So that means it's a reminder to you to get that air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. R.S. Andrews will do that for you. It's just $99, and you'll be nice and cool in the spring and the summer that is on its way. All right, so your comments here. Hope everybody's doing great. I may start on DawgNation.com first just because I kind of shortchanged them a bit. Yeah, here's more of the trophy celebration yesterday. So this was concurrent to us doing the show. This is what it looked like. My son was actually pretty mad at me because so I had to work yesterday, obviously, and I took him to the game, but I had to work. And so we after the show was done, I'm trying to get everything, kind of published and all that kind of stuff, podcasts, stuff like that. And so we didn't get a chance to get our picture taken with the trophies. And so he was pretty disappointed in that. And I told him, I said, listen, I took you out of school to come to this game today, so you can't complain too much. But he was a little disappointed we didn't get our picture taken with the trophies yesterday. But nonetheless, we had a great time. Appreciate the Braves rolling out the red carpet. For us yesterday, we just had a lot of fun and did a great job celebrating a UGA. That was really fun. Brian Whitehead, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Said he enjoyed the show. That's awesome to hear. Brian, I always appreciate that. Let's see what else. Rome Dog says, my daughter just started dating a Tech alumni. Let the fun begin. Yeah, that's pretty fun to think about. There's a lot of that goes on. Ooh, L.A. Lombard. Is it Georgia's turn? Now, I don't think Kirby Smart would ever do stuff like this. I just don't think he cares. But he said, would the G-Day game be 48-46 for the number of days since the last Gator national title? Gosh, that would be amazing. That would be so amazing. Is that what it's going to be on that time? That is really, really good, for sure. Bob Zamblin says, who do you see winning the G-Day, red or black? I currently have the red team as a 9.5-point favorite over the black team. I do. Good to see you, Bob, in the comment section, by the way. Rome Dog says, I've not been around here for a while. Rome, I'm glad you're back. Great to see you. But I like the 48-46 or whatever the number would be for that particular day. I like that as the final score. That's great. DT says he loved Terrence Edwards' take on transfer and stuff like that. Would love a fully thought out set of guidelines by him. And yeah, I think this is important. I mean, if y'all listen to me talk enough, I think you kind of I don't given the choice of being authoritarian or libertarian when it comes to some of this kind of stuff. I'm a little bit more on the authoritarian side. I mean, I will admit that. And I think someone like Terrence Edwards, who spends a lot more time around players, he obviously understands the value of coaching. He obviously understands the need to push players. But this is a guy who also was a player, spends a lot of time around players. And so when he speaks, he clearly comes from the perspective of how do you coach guys up while also, respecting their, right to a little bit of freedom, right to a little bit of, chance to cash in on some of this kind of stuff. How do you respect players while also doing right by them? Because trust me when I tell you, there are plenty of people who the door swings too far one way or another. I said before, if you gave me my power to be king of college football, I'd probably rule this sport with an authoritarian fist. I just probably would. I'm probably a little too far in that direction. Don't mind telling you that. But I also don't mind telling you that there are a lot of other people who kind of swing too far to everything's fine. Whatever you want to do is fine. Yeah, that coach, he don't know what he's doing. You leave, go somewhere else, and whatever else. Like, that's not good for kids. The right amount of rules for optimum freedom is not 0. That's also true in life, by the way, but that's a different topic for a different day. But the right amount of rules for optimum freedom is not 0. And guys like Terrence just have an understanding of that. They know the perspective of a coach while also knowing the perspective of a player. Cat Story also says that Terrence Edwards was spot on about the transfer portal. If guys aren't willing to battle for their positions, hit the road. You're not SEC worthy and definitely not dog worthy. Here's the thing, though. I want to make sure you understand this. Is that really no one said a bad word about Amarius Mims. He just wasn't likely to start at tackle yet. Could he have started at guard? I don't know. But he just likely wasn't ready to start at tackle here this year. And that's not necessarily, a huge negative against him. And, from the perspective of even what Kirby Smart said the other day about Amarius before he went to the transfer portal, thought is that, he's working and getting better and things like that. It's just there is a timeline for when these things are likely to happen. And unfortunately for some players, they, want that timeline accelerated. But yeah, it's important to know that no one really is calling, Mims necessarily like a prima donna on the way out the door or anything like that. He just wasn't likely to start at tackle for Georgia right now. Could an injury occurred? Could he have stepped in there? Could he have maybe moved over to guard? These are things that obviously we'll never have the answer to. But, Warren McClendon's playing the game at a pretty high level right now. Left tackle was open, and Broderick Jones seemingly has taken it. And he took it on the highest stage possible on the national championship game against that bunch from Tuscaloosa. Like that's how it's supposed to go. This is how football's supposed to work. Georgia needed somebody to step up against Alabama. Broderick did, and now he's kind of the guy. And eventually Amarius could have had maybe the same chance. But yeah, good comments there. Let me move over to a YouTube here for a moment. I hope everybody's doing good. Green Soldier says, Terrence Edwards kind of pointed out why Mims should have stayed. Elite program, all the support and money, and being one play away. Now it's a bidding war openly, which is wild. Yeah, so I have a crackpot theory. And I admit that sometimes I'm a total blowhard. I'm pretty self-aware about stuff like that. And so you may not be interested in this, but this is my theory. You ever think for a moment about why football's so popular? Why is it so popular? Well, it's entertaining, but there are a lot of things that are entertaining that are not quite as popular as football is. I am a believer in the fact that we love football because I think football demonstrates what we value in life. And so I'm always really, concerned when things are bubbling up in football that aren't quite representative of our values. I'm talking about, broadly speaking, different ones of us kind of value different things more so than others. But broadly speaking, I think football is a pretty good representation of what most of us value about life. And it becomes an easy way to communicate to our children of, hey, be more like this player, be more like this coach. This is what it means to go out there and just do your job and be the best version of yourself. Football helps explain that. And so we're able to communicate that more easily instead of, trying to come up with these really elaborate life lessons. Hey, just watch football and, do the stuff that makes you good at football. That'll also make you good at life, especially for young boys who just kind of need that. And that's part of what makes football so popular. And so when you have things like, hey, cut bait and run, grass is greener somewhere else, expect it to be given to me right away. These are hallmarks of other sports that don't quite represent the best of life, at least in my mind. But football kind of always has. And so I do get a little bit concerned when I see things creeping into football that don't quite represent what most of us would say we value, because that's not what football has been in the past. Jay Shipe says, did Jimbo send you that shirt with cash in the pocket? I did think about your boy Jimbo, Jay, because, I think it's funny that now people kind of are left to believe, oh my gosh, Florida State's just throwing around this NIL money left and right. I think that's kind of funny a little bit because if you think about why Jimbo Fisher left Florida State, part of his frustration was the fact there was no support for the program whatsoever. So here we are a couple of years later. They couldn't even hold on to their national championship winning coach because he didn't believe that the booster supported the program. All of a sudden now they're supposed to be an NIL machine. I don't quite know what you do with all of that, I guess. Paul Moon asks a very good question. He says, are y'all ever going to give Terrence Edwards his new photo? So whatever happened to the photo for Terrence Edwards? Because he called for the new photo. Did we ever get the new photo for Terrence, Michael? We are being told that we do not currently have the new Terrence Edwards photo. So hopefully we'll be able to debut that soon. So I got to apologize to DSA1. The other day he was asking me about the quarterback that just committed to Clemson. But y'all got me so on guard on YouTube that I thought this was one of those like Moe's Tavern plays on words things like y'all have tried to do me on before. And I don't know why I thought that. So I have to apologize to DSA because he was asking a legit question the other day and I sidestepped him. Jordan Bowman says Jimbo was running that program into the ground and jumped ship. Scott Pete says watch lousy stinking Gators tonight. Oh yeah, there's spring games tonight. I forgot about that. Honestly, I forgot about this. They're playing their spring game on a Thursday night. So there you go. Yeah, we'll watch that. We'll laugh at that for sure. Let me also say this. Is this Jake Shipes again? Oh, yeah, Green Soldier. Okay. He says, your Aggie spring game was rough. They killed their defense on basic RPOs. Inside linebacker play, defensive play was sorely lacking. So we'll see about that. But I do think, though, that Green, I talked earlier about, like, mature programs eventually acquiring better quarterbacks. I do think that A&M is a pretty good example of this there, too, and I meant to mention this. So I think eventually you're going to say, on the basis of how well A&M is recruited, not just this past year, but previous years under Jimbo, that eventually they are likely to be pretty good. It's just hard to have that level of talent without eventually winning some games. It's hard to do. Even if Jimbo's as bad a coach as some of y'all think he is, it'd still be hard to mess this up. So eventually they're going to probably be pretty good. But they don't have a quarterback right now. So if my theory is correct, that they are another example of what a maturing program looks like, getting better along the lines of scrimmage, running the football a little bit better, but still not quite fully developed in the passing game because the best quarterbacks are choosing to go somewhere else at the moment. And so it's almost like, at least theoretically, A&M is like, 5 years behind Georgia or something along those lines, 4 years behind Georgia, that if it all continues to progress this way, eventually A&M may also find itself the quarterback that it needs, much the same way that Georgia may be 1 or 2 years away from. And once Georgia really breaks through with quarterback, it's likely to break through again and again and again because, most people just make safe choices. Right now, Georgia has been viewed as not the safest, most obvious choice for quarterback. That's been Alabama, or a program that really, accentuates quarterback play at the expense of other things like Oklahoma or Ohio State. But once Georgia really breaks through a quarterback, it's likely to, I would say it's likely to find itself a couple of those guys. And maybe this is exactly what you would expect a sort of a Georgia podcast host to say, someone who has Georgia G's, or should say, Georgia Bulldogs all over his shirt. But if you gave me the choice of Georgia building a true dynasty that wins multiple national championships, in addition to one they just won, or a team that kind of goes the way of, say, Ohio State, LSU, which thus far have only won the one national championship in the playoff era. I mean, I think that actually dynasty is probably more likely than the other alternative here, never winning one again or winning multiple. I think the multiple titles is probably more likely because when you do have everything but quarterback, Georgia's quarterback play is going to probably be good this year. I think it was good a year ago. But when you have pretty much everything in the program playing at the great level, maybe other than the quarterback passing game, I just think it's way easier to eventually grow into the kind of program that also acquires that there as well. And then once you do that, it's sort of game over, go home for everybody else, is it not? So that's kind of my thought on that I'm actually very bullish on the future of the Georgia program. Jay Shipe says, is Pickens the most rested, highly skilled wide receiver in draft history? I guess Jamar Chase was probably that because Chase didn't play a lick of football in the year prior to him going to the NFL. And I'll admit, I was kind of curious to see what that would mean for him. A guy that opts out, that's another example of, those aren't really my values. Opting out, that's not what football players do. It didn't hurt Jamar Chase. I have to admit that. He's been a very good player, more than a very good player with the Cincinnati Bengals. So, yeah, Pickens is pretty rested, but I would say that Chase is the most well-rested recently. Michael Clayton says, why do the 5-star quarterbacks play much better when they leave UGA? Is that really the case, though? I mean, Justin Fields played well because he was a good player. But Jacob Eason didn't really play all that well. And I don't mean to dump on Eason, but it's not like Eason set the world on fire playing for Washington. Fields played well for Ohio State because he's good. I don't want to relitigate the whole Fields thing here, but I think that Fields would have been good at Georgia too. I really do. I think Fields is a little bit like Amarius Mims, where like my message to Mims would have been, hey, if you'll just wait for a couple minutes, you're going to have everything that you want come your way. Because I do truly believe he was likely on his way to eventually being a very good player at Georgia. He was just in a hurry. And I think for Fields too, it's like if you'll just wait a second here. I mean, I think folks thought because Fields didn't beat out Fromm in 2018 that he was never going to beat him out. And I don't think that was necessarily the case. Had that situation been allowed to progress naturally, I actually do think eventually Justin Fields would have overtaken Jake Fromm. I really do, because I just think Fields is a better player. And despite what some of y'all think, Kirby Smart is not going to intentionally keep a better player on the bench. He's just not going to. So I think eventually Fields would have probably beaten out Fromm. Fields was also told when he came here that he was probably making a mistake. There were folks in Fields' camp who told him not to come to Georgia, and he still came anyway. So some of what happened for Justin at Georgia, Justin takes the blame for too. He signed up for this situation with people close to him telling him not to do so. High-profile people in some cases telling him he was making a mistake by coming here because Georgia had a quarterback that had just led him to a national championship. But eventually, I do think Fields would have overtaken Fromm because I think that Fields is the better player. Baggins and Friends says if Fields had stayed at UGA, he would have a Heisman. He would have, although if you look at who won. See, here's the thing about Justin. And I'm still very high on Justin as an NFL player. I think that Justin, I'm a big Justin Fields fan. I think that Justin Fields is a very, very intriguing quarterback prospect. I think that Justin also got caught in an era in which the quarterback play was just phenomenal. Like, Fields is not better than Joe Burrow. So even if he'd stayed here at Georgia and emerged as the starter in 2019, the end of season results probably not different because, gosh, Joe Burrow was just so good. Now, I think that Georgia could have been way better, but you're not better than Joe Burrow. And then in 2020, I don't know. When you look at what Alabama has in a pandemic year where there was no defense being played, does Georgia with Fields in 20, do they get over that hump against Alabama? I guess it's possible, I guess. I don't know, though. I don't know. But that's kind of relitigating the past. But that's kind of my thought on that. Paul Moon says, I think that Fields would have been much more prepared for the NFL had he stayed at UGA. Maybe so, but I still think that Fields is a pretty good prospect. Frank Patterson. The YouTube folks, this argument of Alabama's running game has been going on for literally in this comment section for years. It's like it truly is like one of these great rivalries at this point in time. William Perry says, so BA, do you really believe that Stead is the better player than JT? I think that given the full situation last year, Georgia made the right decision at quarterback. I do. If you really want to back me into a corner, I don't think that JT Daniels is what some of you all think that he probably is. I'll just say that and leave it at that. I had very high hopes for Daniels when he first came here, but somehow that ended up not quite being what I kind of hoped that it might be. I think there is plenty of evidence last year that Georgia made the right decision at quarterback. I do. And I don't have a bad word to say about JT, but I do think the JT era is slightly misconstrued at times. Let me go to Facebook here for a moment. All right, on Facebook here for a moment. Johnny Prescott says, despite Jordan Davis's corner painted two-seamer yesterday, he's too nice a guy to be imposing on the mound. Who's the nastiest dog on the roster right now who could be an intimidating ninth-inning closer? That's a great question. Is he too nice to be a closer? It's interesting. Like, have we seen for some reason, Davis's size, I assume, makes it more difficult to pitch. And I guess I'm just sort of thinking that because have we seen, like, the really big, I guess what Braves used to have Terry Forster when I was a kid. He's a pretty big guy. Who'd be the nastiest closer off the current Georgia roster? That's a really good question. For some reason, maybe just because he's such a big hitter, I don't want to see Lewis Seen throwing a baseball. Like, Seen's a little bit of a headhunter as it is. I don't know how hard he'd throw, but I know he'd be willing to come inside. So now that's a guy off the roster now. But I don't like if Lewis Seen pitches the way that he plays football. I'm not quite so sure I want to step in the box on Lewis Seen. Plus, if he, how like sometimes he'd have his hair like down over his eyes a little bit, like if it's almost like like the pitcher that's wearing glasses and you're afraid he can't see. You're like, where's this guy going to throw? Like if Seen's like stepping on the mound, he's got the hair down in front of the eyes. And you're like, does he know where he's throwing it right now? I would say that Seen would probably be pretty intimidating there. Matt Rugavine also says Nakobe Dean give you that 1,000-yard stare. Yeah, see, when I was a kid, this is back when like Dave Stewart, Smoke Stewart was with the A's. I'm going to date myself with that reference. But Smoke was the best at like glove over the eye, like over the nose. So all you saw was the eyes. That mean mug. I mean, like he had that, like Dave Stewart had that look down that was so perfect on the mound. So intimidating. Won a ton of games for the A's. Big time ace. They had like 420 game winners. But he was, big time ace. He had that great, like sort of like mean mug stare. And yeah, I would say that Nakobe would probably be pretty good at that too. I also think, tall guys on the mound are always pretty intimidating. Who's a tall guy for Georgia to be pretty intimidating? I think tall guys like that are generally pretty intimidating. Santiago D. Arnold says he thinks that Lewis Seen would be a great closer. Yeah, and Santi's a big baseball fan, so that's good. Michael Acor says, I'm traveling from Clemson to Athens for the game, so trying to figure out what time to leave to make the dog walk on time. So G-Day dog walks are usually a little tricky because they're not quite as well timed sometimes. I'd say if you get there 3 hours prior to the game, you won't miss it. Now, could you get there later and still make it? You might. But if it's a 1 o'clock start, if you're out there ready to go in the Tate parking lot by 10 a.m., you won't miss it. And, these dog walks get pretty crowded from time to time. So that would be probably my advice on that. But, G-Day is just a little looser. It's a little bit more casual, so you can never quite be sure when they're going to come by. They may come a little later than the 2 hour mark, but for a home game, they're typically rolling through there about 2:15 prior to a game. So if you're there by 10, you won't miss it. You just may be standing there waiting for a little while. Rick Wallace mentions Al Hrabosky, the mad Hungarian. It's a little before my time, but I do know him. Well, he's the guy that like pound the ball in the glove and then turn around. Yeah, I've seen some video of that. Rick Wallace says bring some swim gear if attending the dog walk. I don't want it to rain. And I realize my wants aren't going to keep it from happening, but we get one shot at this during the spring. It's really pretty frustrating. That's really frustrating. Kent Holcomb, this may be the winner. If Darnell Washington stepped onto the mound, remember, for those of you who are like old-time 90s baseball fans, remember John Kruk, how scared he used to be of Randy Johnson? Like he was just horrified of Randy Johnson. Honestly, I think this is the answer. Kent Holcomb is right. I would not step in the box against Darnell Washington, especially like I mentioned Randy Johnson. The tall guys that have the big leg kick. Like I don't know, if Darnell's got quite the big leg kick. But if Darnell goes from the stretch and he gives you that big high knee leg kick as he's coming towards home, I ain't stepping in on that. I'm just telling you right now. I'm going to make a business decision on that. a lot of you know, especially if you've been in our comment section for a long time, I love the idea of football players playing basketball. I just love the way it sounds when a football player dunks a basketball, just shakes the rim. Some of y'all are getting me interested in the notion of like football players as baseball players too. That's pretty fun to think about. Michael Acor about the dog walk. Yeah, so there should be a dog walk on Saturday, but somebody was talking about it's just going to rain. That the current forecast suggests that, but we got to operate on the assumption that everything is going to happen as it's supposed to. So that means I was telling somebody earlier, if you want to make sure you don't miss it, be there by 10 a.m. You could probably get there later and still make it, because sometimes these things are a little later when it comes to G Day and whatnot. But if you're there by 10, you won't miss it. All right, what time is it? We got to get ready to go. It's late. Wow. William Perry says rain is why the G-Day game should be on Masters weekend, because God doesn't let it rain during the Masters. That's an interesting idea, interesting take on a lot of folks love the idea of G-Day and the Masters being separated, but William says that could be a protection against the weather, which is kind of interesting. Miriam Corbin, who was at the Braves game yesterday, says, yesterday was a magical day for our family. We've been Dogs and Braves fans forever. Such a special thing for us. Love getting that photo with the long-awaited trophies. Priceless. Yeah, I mean, to have them both in the same place at the same time is really pretty amazing. Really pretty amazing. All right, we got to go. Let me do one more trip around the comment section. Lucy Bowers-Boykin also brings up a good point, that it's supposed to be scattered rain, so it could potentially pass us. That's good. Lucy giving us good information, but also a good perspective on life. That's nice. Jonathan Aaron on YouTube says, with all the NIL money and free one-time transfer, do you think football will ever get back to the good old days where kids will wait their turn and get better and not just transfer, get results now? So here's what I think about that. I don't know that the transfer portal has been great for a lot of people. And, who would you rather be? Would you rather be, say, Mac Jones, who waited and waited and waited and waited, eventually became a starter at the NFL, or these guys who are transferring and they're bouncing from place to place, and it's just not really happening for them? In other words, if you really do trust the system that you're in, we may come to a point in time where we really do have preponderance of evidence that suggests getting developed in the system is actually working out well for more people. And Kirby said this for years, that if you want to be in the NFL, it's not about how quickly you're playing, but how well you're developing while you're playing. He said some version of this in the past. And it's going to be hard to convince kids of that, because when you've got these unscrupulous programs, and I think to a degree some of this is unscrupulous, when you've got these unscrupulous programs tampering, whispering in their ears, and I'm not even talking about just Mims here, I'm talking about anybody, telling them exactly what they want to hear, making these wild, exaggerated promises to them, it's easy to want to buy into that and listen to that. But hopefully there's also going to be some just basic level reporting of, okay, here are all the guys that transferred. Here's how it worked out for them. Here are the guys who waited, and here's how well it worked out for them. I mean, look at Channing Tindall for a moment. Tindall is, what are you going to be, probably a third-round pick? That's a potential for a pretty good NFL career right there. It's not, top 10 overall. And he's not going to have, 8-figure signing bonus or anything like that. But he's going to make a living playing football. And he waited a good long while at Georgia to truly get the chance to show how good he really was. How many people who've transferred are going to be in better shape for the NFL than Channing Tindall's going to be? And I just think it's I'm not even saying that I know for sure the answer, but I think those are the kinds of questions we ought to be asking. Jordan Bowman also brings up a really good point, and this is the thing that I can't get anybody to care about, but I promise you this means something to me. Jordan says that transfer portals also hurt high school recruits, and the guys that enter and have nowhere to go. Yeah, I mean, there are fewer kids by the hundreds signing scholarships out of high school. I spent a lot of time around the high school game, and I talked to these coaches, I talked to these players. It is their dream to play football. They're not worried about NIL. They're not worried about their street agent. They're not worried about any of that kind of stuff. What they are worried about is a scholarship to sign. That is their dream. They don't have any wishes or desires more so than that. I mean, a lot of people. It's a very, very, the desire to play college ball, as you might imagine, is so high that, just the idea that you could get the attention of a Division I FBS level program is just like it's just the wildest dream they can conjure for so many players. And yet a couple of hundred of them less signed a scholarship last year than the year before. And that's just troubling to me. And for players who go into the transfer portal and find out they don't have anywhere to go, like there's a story the other day about a guy that was like I forget which program. I think I remember which program. I don't want to say and be wrong, but it's like an all-conference level player at the Group of 5 level who went in the transfer portal, thought he was going to get a bigger offer somewhere else, didn't get it. Now he's like just languishing in the portal, and there's this thought of almost like a house that doesn't sell after several months of, well, there must be something wrong with it if it's still sitting on the market this long, and all of a sudden the player, as has been reported, I think The Athletic did a story on this, is just kind of languishing in the transfer portal, and players like him, you're starting to left to wonder, well, if they've been here this long, they haven't found a home, maybe we don't want them either. There were a lot of people who pushed for the transfer portal because I believe they like the idea of destabilizing college football. And I hope that some of those same people go back a year or two later and just sort of check on how this is working for the players that actually play college football. All right. Back to DawgNation.com, then we got to go. Anything else? Rome Dog says, I tailgated all our home games considering tailgating UGA or anyone. Tailgating Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So the good news is now it's way too early for me to make an announcement about this, but if you're thinking about the Oregon game, Rome, we should have a big event before that game. Like I said, this is way too early to be talking about any of that. But if you're looking for something to do before the Oregon game, I will be shocked if we don't have a pretty fun big event there before that game that day. All right, so that's good. All right, really good stuff. Thanks for being here. R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Find R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, plumbing, electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised. The price is promised. Your water heater goes out. In many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. Just got to find them online at rsandrews.com. Also, make sure you check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, ajc.com. Bunch of stuff going on there. Getting ready for elections, and obviously there's a lot of coverage there on that. Also, Hawks got a big win last night against – there's drama last night in the Hawks-Hornets game. Did you see this? Where, underneath State Farm, there's a bunch of trains. And if you ever – I used to go to a bunch of Hawks games. You always get stuck by the trains. Well, I guess last night the Hornets got stuck, couldn't get into the arena because you go underneath the arena to get in right there, and they couldn't do that. They had to walk. And they're complaining about that. Then one of their guys threw his saliva-filled mouth guard into the stands. Hawks got a big win, played better than they've played, at least in stretches, for a good portion of the season. There was a good bit of drama at State Farm last night. You can follow that. Also, Braves heading towards San Diego for a series, and then in L.A. after that. And there'll be a lot of attention on Freddie Freeman when that happens. So AJC's got you plenty of coverage there on that too. So Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ajc.com. Check out all of that. We will see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. Look forward to speaking to you then.